Right now, NATO is taking Russia hostage. The countdown has already begun. The Kremlin is in a panic. Putin, in desperation, is turning his sights on Estonia, the beginning of a new war. The weapons are loaded. The launch of Oreshnik from Belarus, it has happened. Allied troops are entering Ukraine. A massive rout of the Russian army will happen any day now. Peacekeepers are heading straight for the Kremlin. All this and more in our episode Hellpoint. At last, Nato has started to act, coming right up to Russia and pulling a fast one. Putin's eye is already twitching. Finland is now the new threat to the Kremlin's might. So many weapons have been gathered that with just one command, Putin will be wiped out. It's hard to believe. Russia has never been this close to failure. The first exclusive details. Don't miss what's next.
NATO is Russia's new neighbor. As of September 1st, the regional command headquarters of the alliance's ground forces has officially begun operations in the Finnish city of Mikkeli, according to the Finnish army. Mikkeli is located just 140 kilometers from the Russian border and a little over 300 kilometers from St. Petersburg.
This decision is a clear political signal to the Russian Federation that Finland is a full-fledged member of NATO. We can consider this a countermove by the NATO bloc in response to the construction of new military bases near the Finnish border, such as in Kandalaksha, Petrozavodsk, and a number of other settlements on the territory of the Russian Federation.
At the first stage, the headquarters plans to accommodate about a dozen people. Later, they plan to increase the staff fivefold.
NATO is making it clear to the Russian Federation about possible future scenarios for the development of events in the event of escalating tensions directly on the borders with the NATO bloc. Let me remind you, Finland joined the NATO bloc in 2023, and after that, the total length of NATO's border with the Russian Federation doubled and now amounts to 2,600 kilometers.
The headquarters will oversee the alliance's land forces in the northern region, coordinate the actions of national armies, as well as jointly plan exercises and operations. The new structure will be subordinate to NATO's Norfolk Command in the USA, which is responsible for the Atlantic and the Arctic.
Recently, the Russian Federation has been undertaking a series of provocative actions along the borders with the NATO bloc. This concerns not only land borders, but also, accordingly, maritime borders. This includes the incursion of a Russian vessel into Estonia's territorial waters. This also includes the statement by the Russian Ministry of Defense regarding claims to the Swedish island of Gotland in the Baltic Sea. And these are the most recent actions involving the jamming of GPS signals, specifically affecting the aircraft of Ursula von der Leyen.
The Finnish Minister of Defense, Antti Häkkänen, has approved the deployment for August 2025. Last autumn, Häkkänen emphasized that the establishment of the headquarters in Mikkeli is a signal to Moscow. Finland is a full member of NATO, and the alliance plays a key role in ensuring its defense security.
NATO has taken advantage of the current situation that has developed in the post-Soviet space. Accordingly, no one asked the Russian Federation for permission regarding Finland and Sweden's accession. Essentially, Finland's accession to NATO marks the end of its 75-year status as a neutral country.
The main reason Finland abandoned its long-standing neutrality and joined NATO is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. By threatening to block the expansion of the military alliance, the Kremlin dictator launched a war in Ukraine, where for the fourth year he has been killing people and destroying their homes. At the same time, right under Putin's nose, or more precisely, right up to Russia's border, NATO quietly crept in, expanding its scale and spheres of influence.
Urgent, an inevitable flare-up. The Kremlin is starting a new war in Europe. Putin has signed off on yet another bloody scenario, a threat to the Baltic countries. Estonia is already in position. The whole world is holding its breath. NATO forces are at the border. Something terrifying is coming. Full combat readiness. Will the alliance manage to prevent a new phase of Russian aggression? We'll tell you in a moment.
Kremlin propagandists have received new directives from above, along with fresh talking points from Putin. It seems the bunker dweller has finally decided who he wants to attack next and has already begun the ideological preparation of the population for another invasion. Now the Kremlin has set its sights on one of the NATO countries, namely Estonia.
The Estonian Foreign Ministry has banned its citizens from traveling to Russia. A particular point of interest is an article in the Polish publication Onet, which states that Estonia is ready to launch a preemptive strike against Russia. Estonia against Russia?
And even though Estonia is 300 times smaller than Russia, even the Kremlin's own propagandists don't take such a scenario seriously on their broadcasts. But orders are orders, which means the population of Russia needs to be actively prepared for a new military conflict.
Estonia plans to increase its military spending to 5.4% of GDP within 4 years, and right now Estonia is already strengthening its border with our country. The federal authorities are erecting barriers along more than 300 kilometers. The civilian population is preparing for a hypothetical conflict with Moscow. People in the border regions are building personal underground bunkers in case of nuclear war.
And they are actively joining the so-called Defense League, a crucial alliance in case a major conventional war breaks out.
And that is absolutely true. Estonia is preparing not to attack, but to defend itself from Putin. All the more so since the Russian Foreign Ministry officially considers the Baltics a potential zone for another conflict.
The Journal of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Affairs, published an article about the Baltic Sea in which it suggested considering it a potential theater of military operations.
This is a specific operation by Russian special services aimed at destabilizing the situation in our country. We are constantly subjected to various provocations, this happens all the time, and we are always prepared for and expecting more serious provocations and acts of aggression, as they say. In other words, we are ready for this and ready to defend ourselves.
With each passing day, there are more and more Russian provocations on the border with Estonia. This includes both cyber attacks and mysterious jamming of satellite signals. The Kremlin is not shy about using its reconnaissance drones over the territory of a NATO country either. Meanwhile, official Tallinn is already actively preparing to repel potential Russian occupiers. It is increasing defense spending, conducting exercises, and quickly mining its borders with Russia in case of a military invasion.
Russia does not choose its means in this brutal war it is waging. It violates every possible agreement it has itself joined. First and foremost, we must focus on how to protect our country, NATO, and the EU. Estonia will certainly approach this very responsibly.
In Estonia, the current trend is exactly that we are now fully realizing. Unfortunately, I must emphatically emphasize regrettably and unfortunately, and especially after President Donald Trump came to occupy the esteemed position in the White House, we have come to profoundly realize that we must be fully capable of dealing with any potential or possible aggression from the Russian Federation entirely on our own. Right at this very moment, we are diligently putting a substantial amount of concerted effort into being completely ready and thoroughly prepared to defend ourselves independently and autonomously.
And this goes completely against the Kremlin's plans. As military analysts explain, given the pace at which defensive lines are being built in Estonia and the endless string of failures suffered by the Russian army in the war in Ukraine, Putin simply does not have the resources or means to open a full-fledged second front. And so only one scenario remains: an information war primarily targeting the Russian-speaking population of the Baltic countries.
That is, the largest group consists of those who are ready for all these challenges and support any government initiatives to strengthen defense capabilities. The second group, which unfortunately is also not small in our country, I don't even know what to call them, Vatniks, Putinists, Russian speakers, the fifth column, well, there are many names for them. So this is a group of people who, while the first group is preparing to fight back in anticipation of aggression, this second group is waiting for Putin to send in troops to finally liberate them and to destroy this damned Estonia, because with every fiber of their being, with all their insides, they hate Estonia. Estonia as a state, Estonia as a culture, Estonia as a language, and every aspect of our way of life. They simply hate it and can't wait for Putin to give them the order to start wreaking havoc here.
Relying on such supporters of the Russian world, Putin is planning to invade a neighboring country. That is why analysts tend to believe the bunker dweller chose relatively small Estonia with a population of less than 1.4 million people as a potential victim. Small Russian sabotage groups, given the right circumstances and support from the Russian-speaking population of Estonia, might attempt to repeat in Tallinn the scenario of the 2014 annexation of Crimea and Donbass.
Small groups of unidentified men without insignia, following the classic playbook, seized the post office, telephone exchange, telegraph, ATM, electronics store, and liquor store. just like we saw in Donetsk and Luhansk in Crimea. And after that, the creation of some kind of territorial autonomy is proclaimed. The local population enthusiastically supports it, cheering, "Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah." Tanks are brought in, and that's it. Now it's a sovereign republic that asks Putin to annex them. So once again, in Donetsk, we saw a small number of genuinely pro-Russian citizens who, in a situation where the authorities were paralyzed and indecisive, managed to organize barricades, seized district police stations back when it was still the militia, gained access to firearms, and this really became an avalanche-like movement that was almost impossible to stop, even with the use of the army.
This is exactly the kind of scenario that Russian propagandists are actively discussing on their television broadcasts. According to their scare stories, Estonia wouldn't last even a few days, and the North Atlantic Alliance wouldn't have time to react before Russian tanks are supposedly under the windows of all the major cities in Europe.
And after that, it's Paris, Berlin, and on the desolate ruins of Washington, we'll inscribe our own modest names. So that's basically the mood.
But all these dreams of Putin and his propagandists are never going to come true. According to analysts, instead of swallowing Estonia, the Kremlin will break its teeth on it. No matter how many supporters of the Russian world live in the Baltic countries, all of them support Putin from the comfort of their own homes, in warm apartments with running water and heating, good pensions, and all the other benefits of life in Europe. And Estonia is no exception here.
This country ranks 10th in the world for quality of life, 6th for economic freedom, 12th in the Corruption Perceptions Index. By the way, Russia is ranked 141st, first in Europe for the quality of school education, and 4th in the world. This country is consistently at the top of all sorts of other rankings as well. For example, it has the highest number of startups in Europe.
And it's unlikely that anyone, even the most ardent supporters of the Russian world, would want to trade all this for life in Russia, with its corruption, unemployment, and Putin's total rule.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Right before our eyes, a new threat has flared up on the border with Belarus. Lukashenko is going all in. Under the guise of exercises, they are preparing a nuclear scenario. Oreshnik has been activated. Russian troops are moving in columns. Tanks and armored vehicles are on standby. Putin is pushing harder, and the danger for Ukraine is reaching a new level. What does this mean, and what should we be preparing for right now? All about this in the following report.
Military exercises involving nuclear weapons have begun in Belarus. Ukrainian border guards have heightened their readiness.
We genuinely feel quite confident and remarkably calm when we are here. We are not hiding the topics of the exercises. We say that the main theme is practicing the defense of our territory with the joint regional group of forces. This event is scheduled.
Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan have joined the Collective Security Treaty Organization exercises. China, North Korea, and India declined to participate.
The statements directed at Belarus, claiming that Belarus or the Russian Federation is threatening someone, actually contradict the actions they themselves are taking.
According to preliminary estimates, about 3,000 servicemen will come from Russia. Belarus will involve between 7 and 10,000. The maneuvers, according to the authorities of the Republic of Belarus, will take place at the Losvido and Lepelsky training grounds.
Russia and Belarus are not just allies. We have a common defense space, which we are strengthening due to the very complex international situation.
Belarus has planned several separate events at once. The Interaction 2025 exercises for the Collective Rapid Response Forces, the Search 2025 exercises involving reconnaissance assets, as well as the Echelon 2025 maneuvers for logistics and technical support units.
The comprehensive defense of our national territory by the joint regional group of forces is a meticulously planned and scheduled event. It is certainly not some sudden, unexpected decision or anything of that nature.
According to the official version, their goal is to practice joint defensive and offensive actions.
Since 2020, a decision was made to create a regional group of forces, so we are strictly following the decisions of our heads of state. We hold these exercises every 2 years.
It has been announced that the exercises will include the use of nuclear weapons and the Oreshnik missile system. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine has already responded to the exercises.
We warn Minsk against reckless provocations. We advise maintaining composure, staying away from the borders, and not provoking the Ukrainian defense forces.
Belarus claims that the nuclear weapons themselves will not be used in any conflict or for any aggressive purposes.
You can't use something that, let's say, poses a threat to the whole world, to global security. So how do you plan for that? We'll learn.
Analysts suggest that these exercises may have a hidden purpose to create the conditions for amassing Russian troops and equipment on Belarusian territory.
We are ready for the exercises. We're not hiding anything from anyone. We are truly demonstrating openness that these exercises are ours.
Such exercises traditionally cause concern among neighboring countries due to the risk of provocations, incidents, or unpredictable actions.
We have reduced the number of troops by almost half, moved their location deeper into our own territory, hundreds of kilometers away from the border to training grounds.
At the moment, Russian forces on Belarusian territory consist mainly of vehicles, a limited amount of armored equipment, and personnel.
We are conducting these exercises independently, by our own decision, and not without regard for the countries to our west. This is about raising the level of training of our servicemen and the level of cooperation between the armed forces of Belarus and Russia. We are doing this for ourselves to show, essentially, that we are ready to defend ourselves and do not threaten anyone.
But the active phase of Zapad 2025 is scheduled for September 12 to 16. During this period, an increased presence of Russian units is expected, including tanks and armored vehicles.
They don't believe it, and we don't believe it either, that it's possible to cross the Belarusian-Ukrainian border from here right now. We know what's happening at the border. It's completely reinforced with mines, it's mined, so if you try to go there, you'll lose thousands of people.
Lukashenko has repeatedly and consistently assured that the upcoming military exercises pose absolutely no significant threat either to neighboring Ukraine or to the Baltic countries and the nation of Poland.
They warn, saying things like, they'll go through the Suwałki corridor to Kaliningrad, cut off the Baltics, capture 3 countries and so on, NATO countries.
However, back in 2022, he said the same thing about the impossibility of an invasion of Ukraine from Belarus after Zapad 2021, but a week later he gave his territory to the Kremlin for the attack on Ukraine.
You accused Russia and Belarus, saying that we would invade, yesterday, that we would invade Ukraine. We did not invade. So your intelligence and the billions of dollars you spend are worthless.
In response to the exercises in 2025, Poland will conduct its own strategic exercises called Iron Defender, which will also involve some NATO member countries.
The very fact of holding Russian-Belarusian exercises does not pose a threat to Poland. The Ministry of National Defense is taking them seriously. At present, there are no signs that these exercises could escalate into the threat of an armed conflict.
The commander of the Lithuanian army stated that about 40,000 servicemen will be concentrated in the Baltic countries and Poland.
These exercises, after the events of 2022 in Ukraine, have acquired clearly defined boundaries of perception. They are starting to be perceived not just as exercises, but as something perhaps more than mere military maneuvers. There will be disinformation coming from absolutely all sides. 90% will be Russian and unfortunately 10% will be from others. Hysteria will be fueled.
The situation on the border with Belarus and the monitoring of Russian military action remain in the focus of Ukrainian forces.
It's been decided NATO is breaking into the Ukrainian front. Fresh developments in the defense sector that were previously only speculated about. The Allies have prepared a surprise capable of changing the course of the war. The armed forces of Ukraine will receive a power the enemy cannot even anticipate. The Kremlin is alarmed. What will it be? Which weapon will be tested first and what secret trump cards are still hidden will be revealed very soon. Don't miss it.
Weapons that haven't been tested in Ukraine and don't bear that mark will soon fall out of favor in the West. After all, when the largest war in Europe since World War II is underway, laboratory testing has lost its meaning. Now any development can be tested directly on the battlefield. The Brave One defense cluster has officially announced the launch of the Test in Ukraine program, which will allow foreign arms manufacturers to test new products directly on the front lines. Companies will send their latest developments to Ukraine, conduct comprehensive online training on how to effectively use them, and then patiently wait for Ukrainian troops to thoroughly test them and send back detailed reports.
A large number of private companies currently engaged in armaments and weapons production have made a significant contribution to this field. And now there is a critical need to coordinate interaction between these companies. Thanks to such testing grounds, we can say that interaction will take place, more collaborations will happen, and this will make it possible to create joint products that will work more effectively.
First and foremost, this concerns unmanned systems, electronic warfare complexes, and missile systems.
This drone has already
laid more than 180 mines and has performed quite well. And as you can see, it returned. Among the other drones you saw, there are kamikaze drones. Basically, it's universal. It can be used as a kamikaze drone and for delivering cargo, especially small loads.
According to Mikhailo Fedorov, the Minister of Digital Transformation, this influx of partners and the mass dispatch of equipment for testing in Ukraine will help find solutions faster, ultimately changing the course of the war.
The armed conflict is currently in an intense phase, which gives corporations the opportunity to test their weapon systems in real combat conditions. Most of these technologies include drones, systems for controlling them, processing the intelligence they gather, as well as means for detecting and countering drones, mainly through electronic warfare, but also using air defense systems.
At the same time, experts say the Test in Ukraine program not only helps to test developments on the battlefield, but also to understand how Western weapons perform against a potential adversary. After all, Russia has been officially recognized at the Nato level as one of the main threats to the alliance.
This gives them an advantage, the opportunity to test their developments against the Russian army, to study Russian defense systems, and to adapt their weaponry to counter the technologies that Russia uses on the battlefield and possibly those that China may use in the future.
Participants in the program have the opportunity to test their developments not only at the front but also deep in the rear of Russia if we are talking about long-range weapons. This includes countering Russian electronic warfare systems, the ability to identify targets using artificial intelligence, and of course, the direct capability to destroy the required target.
Such capabilities exist. Currently, they are mainly being implemented with the help of long-range drones. A wide variety of factories are being struck, ones that are critical for the military.
The military-industrial facilities of the Russian Federation.
In addition, manufacturers will be able to test their products directly on site, that is, by coming to Ukraine themselves. This will allow for real-time modifications. There is also the option to entrust testing to Brave One specialists. In that case, the experts will conduct the testing themselves and provide partners with a detailed report on the results. And this work is already underway, particularly in the field of UAVs.
Many of these drones, as I understand it, are classified. For example, Vibet as well as Vector. Both are used for reconnaissance, surveillance, and data collection. This conflict is a perfect testing ground for weapons.
In an interview with Reuters, Artem Moroz, head of investor relations at Brave One, said that many companies have already shown interest in the Test in Ukraine program, of course without going into details. So who and what exactly is going to be tested in Ukraine? Russia will find out in real time.
A sensational twist. Peacekeepers enter, a buffer zone is created. Putin suddenly gives up 4 Ukrainian regions. NATO makes a move that changes the rules of the game. Europe is shocked. The whole world is talking about it. What does this mean and what consequences await? Find out next. The creation of a buffer zone 40 kilometers wide. Such an initiative is being considered by European partners as part of a peace agreement, according to Politico, which cites anonymous sources. Allegedly, according to journalists, Moscow has supported this idea. There has been no response from Ukraine yet. And it's not surprising, because the creation of a buffer zone would obviously mean the loss of some territories currently controlled by Kiev. This idea has only been openly commented on by Jim Townsend, a former Pentagon official who oversaw policy toward Europe and NATO in the Obama administration. They're grasping at straws. The Russians are not afraid of the Europeans, and if they think that a couple of British and French observers will stop them from marching into Ukraine, they're mistaken. European diplomats prefer not to comment on the actual partition of Ukraine. It also remains unclear who is ready to send their peacekeepers and when. So far, only the French and the British have shown a positive attitude. The commander of the Lithuanian forces stated that his soldiers would go to Ukraine only after a ceasefire or after a peace agreement is signed. The authorities of Poland and Germany are against it, as are the United States. Another problem is the number of troops. Currently, NATO is facing difficulties in preparing rapid response forces to defend the alliance's eastern flank from a possible Russian attack. For this, 300,000 service members are needed. At the same time, patrolling a potential buffer zone would require an additional 40,000 to 60,000 troops. They would not only monitor compliance with agreements, but also train the defense forces. NATO members are negotiating with US representatives regarding the provision of satellite intelligence and air support, although they do not expect significantly greater involvement. Senior Pentagon officials have already informed their European colleagues that the US role in any security guarantees for Ukraine will be minimal. The US Department of Defense did not respond to a request for comment. The US is probably the only NATO country with a sufficient number of satellites to provide the intelligence needed to monitor whether Russia is violating the terms of a ceasefire or peace agreement. These proposals from Europeans who are troubled by a bloody war on their doorstep are perceived by Ukrainians as mockery.
If they actually provide troops, yes, because the rest of the restrictions on Russia don't work. On paper, it's not worth a damn. And they say, give us missiles, give us troops, give us weapons. The question to Europe, do you actually have weapons? No, they say we don't. Are you ready to provide troops? Ready, but not all of us and not now, only after a peaceful settlement. We tell them one simple thing. Friends, you are preparing for war, thinking the Russians will attack you. We can make it so they don't attack. Send troops now, bring them here already, and the situation will be resolved. But the Europeans are still thinking. We have Budapest, which turned out to be just an empty piece of paper. Nothing. We have the case of Ichkeria, which is better known today as Kadyrov's regime.
Interestingly, it was the Russian dictator who was the first to announce the creation of a buffer zone in Ukraine in the spring of 2025. At that time, these words seemed to serve as a justification for further military aggression in the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. After a massive attack on Ukraine, which resulted in 23 deaths in Kyiv alone, the Kremlin sent Maria Zakharova to the microphone. Speaking directly in Russian, she once again voiced the Russians' conditions. They will agree to a peace deal only after the demilitarization, denazification, and the establishment of a neutral, non-aligned, and non-nuclear status for Ukraine. By the way, Zakharova made this statement on the Day of Remembrance for the fallen defenders of Ukraine. This day was established at the end of August for a reason. 11 years ago, after negotiations, the Russians gave the encircled Ukrainian armed forces near Ilovaisk a so-called green corridor. However, the agreements were violated and the unarmed soldiers were simply shot at, as if at a shooting range. That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hatsakalo. There will be even more hellish news in our next broadcast. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you soon.